Hey everybody, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to give you my thoughts on the WWE pay-per-view events, the B-PPV events from Backlash 2002 through Judgment Day 2003, which was the last pay-per-view that featured both the Raw and SmackDown brands before WWE decided to do brand exclusive pay-per-views. So let's start off with Backlash 2002, 1 month after WrestleMania 18, and as it turns out, this would be the last WWF pay-per-view before the change to WWE. Overall, I thought this was an okay show. Obviously, the big story from this pay-per-view was the comeback of Hulk Hogan winning the WWE World title one final time in his match with Triple H. I'm as big of a Hulk Hogan fan as anybody, but it was a little bit over the top and a little bit unrealistic for Hulk Hogan to be winning the WWE title. Yes, it was a feel-good moment, Hogan getting the title one more time, but watching Triple H selling for Hulk Hogan just wasn't very believable. When Triple H was beating guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, to see him selling for Hulk Hogan, I don't know, didn't really work out that well. And they had outside interference, they had The Undertaker interfering, they had Chris Jericho interfering, all this stuff. So, Hogan did get the win with some controversy, but then after the match was over, Triple H was like, yeah, you won, and then he shakes his hand and that was the end of it. Just didn't fit the Triple H character of being a cerebral assassin who would break all the rules and would never shake hands with somebody, especially when there was outside interference and whatnot. So, there were some logic issues with this, but, was Hulk Hogan winning the title? Feel-good moment for everybody, but perhaps WWE went a little bit too far with Hogan. He got the tremendous reaction at WrestleMania, but it was perhaps not the time for Hogan to be winning the title, if ever. Just felt like WWE rushed it because Hogan had gotten such a big reaction at WrestleMania, and they thought Hogan was red hot again and this was going to be a new era of Hulkamania perhaps. But as it turned out, it was more of fans just popping because Hogan was a nostalgia act and people were reflecting on their childhood, and that's why they reacted to Hogan like that. So perhaps WWE made a mistake here putting the title on Hogan. People will be debating about that. As far as the rest of the show goes, I guess a few decent matches on here. One of the most noteworthy matches was Kurt Angle versus Edge. I thought that this match was awesome. Really tremendous match between these two, and I'll get to more on them in a few minutes here. They had an excellent match, which Kurt Angle won. And then you had Brock Lesnar making his first WWE pay-per-view appearance, defeating Jeff Hardy. Nothing too significant about it. It's funny seeing Brock Lesnar come out with this really generic music, which thankfully they did change that up. And everything else on the show was fairly forgettable. You had Eddie Guerrero versus RVD, which was actually Frog Splash versus Frog Splash for the IC title. I thought that was a good match. Everything else on the show was fairly forgettable. Moving on here to Judgment Day, which was the first WWE pay-per-view since the name change. And this show was also decent, but nothing too spectacular. Although I will say Kurt Angle and Edge, the hair versus hair match, that was another really good match from those two. I actually felt that the Backlash match was a little bit better, but I liked the storyline with the hair versus hair, and I thought they did an awesome job building it up with all those segments showing them what they would look like if they were bald, and Edge doing all these things to prank Kurt Angle. I just love that feud in general. I thought that was one of the better feuds of 2002, and this match was a lot of fun. I did have a bit of an issue with how they handled the post-match. Basically, Edge won, and then Kurt Angle took off and ran away. And for the next 45 minutes on the show, you have WWE cutting backstage and Edge trying to locate Kurt Angle. And I thought this was a bit over the top and ridiculous, but I did like the ending when they finally had Edge get his hands on Kurt Angle and knocked him out and got the hair shaved, and the crowd's chanting, "You're bald at Angle." So this was a lot of fun. This was the best thing on the show, in my opinion. Eddie Guerrero and RVD in a rematch. Another really good match from these two. everything else was fairly standard, nothing too significant. Pretty sad to see Steve Austin in one of the opening matches on the show, and no wonder he ended up walking out on the company a couple weeks after this. Steve Austin, like, third match of the night against Ric Flair and the Big Show in a handicap match, which Austin won, but still, between that and facing Scott Hall in a mid-card match, I could totally understand why Austin was frustrated with the direction of the company and the direction of his character. And then you had a completely ridiculous tag team match where Rikishi was teamed up with Rico against Billy and Chuck. And Rico, of course, wasn't going to team with Rikishi since he was managing Billy and Chuck. And then Rikishi ended up winning the match anyways. This just showed how little the tag team titles meant at this point. The tag division was just a mess. And then we had Triple H versus Chris Jericho, Hell in a Cell, which I thought was a step down from the previous Hell in a Cell matches, but that's what happens when you set the bar so high with these Hell in a Cell matches that there's no way to really live up to them. And this was really the first Hell in a Cell match where you didn't have one of those huge bumps. There was no Mick Foley, no Shawn Michaels, and I think going in, I remember when I first watched this, myself and other people, we were all expecting some sort of big bump because that's what was happening in the Hell in a Cell matches. That's what we had come to expect, and when it didn't happen, it was disappointing. But this was still a good match, and this was the match where referee Tim White took the bump. He got knocked off the apron onto the cage and actually ended his refereeing career. So that was noteworthy, and the match itself, it was still a good match, but definitely a step down from the previous Hell in a Cell matches. And then Undertaker beating Hulk Hogan for the world title. As I mentioned earlier, the Hogan experiment didn't really work. I think WWE perhaps just pulled the trigger too quickly. They thought Hogan was getting these big reactions, and it was perhaps the start of a new beginning for Hulkamania. But when Hogan won the title, the ratings started free-falling, both on Raw and SmackDown. Hogan was appearing on both shows, and ratings were going down, and it was clear the Hogan experiment didn't work, and fans popped because he was a nostalgic act, not that he was this major superstar that was going to be able to carry the company again. So it was clear Hogan wasn't the right direction, so they quickly got the title off of him, and this was not a very good match at all. In fact, it has one of the worst choke slams of all time, with Undertaker trying to choke slam Hogan and can't even get Hogan up. Hogan won't even go up for it, and literally I think Hogan got off the ground maybe a foot or two. It was, I can't even explain it. It was one of the worst choke slams in history. Words don't even do it justice how bad it was. And then, of course, Vince comes out and screws over Hogan, and Undertaker wins the title. So the Hulk Hogan experiment as champion was quickly ended. And, very disappointing because WWE pay-per-views over the years usually have really strong main events, and this wasn't one of them. And that brought the show down a lot. So Judgment Day had some highlights, but also a lot of low points as well. Next up, we have Vengeance, which was in July 2002. This was after Eric Bischoff had come into the company as the new GM. And WWE had already given up on the whole Ric Flair, Vince McMahon as owners of each respective brand. Ric Flair lost the match to Vince. They dropped that storyline, and Vince decided to have general managers. And that's where Stephanie McMahon came in on SmackDown and Eric Bischoff came in on Raw. And they did this angle where Triple H, he's such a big star that, they dedicated a whole segment on pay-per-view to see which side Triple H would go on. So that was one of the big hooks for this pay-per-view, was find out which brand Triple H is going to join. Kind of lame, and they ended up taking about 15 minutes of pay-per-view time to do this. And of course Shawn Michaels came out and convinced Triple H to come with him on Raw and they can have fun again. Triple H accepts that, and then the next night Triple H turns on him and leads up to that whole SummerSlam storyline. So looking at the card here, one noteworthy thing was the first pay-per-view appearance of a guy you all know very well by the name of John Cena. John Cena in his first pay-per-view match against Chris Jericho, and actually picked up a win against Jericho. So Jericho was, putting people over, shortly after losing the Undisputed title, and you know, some people don't like that Jericho had won the title and wasn't taken seriously, but you know, Jericho was never selfish. He was always putting over the younger talent, and he did so here, despite the fact that he was just a couple months off from being Undisputed champion. And everything else on this show was fairly standard. Main event was very enjoyable. I thought it was a really good triple threat match with The Rock beating The Undertaker and Kurt Angle to win the Undisputed title, and of course that would lead up to SummerSlam. One thing I didn't get on this show, you had Brock Lesnar versus RVD, and they're building up Brock Lesnar for SummerSlam in the main event. He already won King of the Ring, and they have Brock lose by DQ. Brock is on the verge of losing, and Paul Heyman causes the DQ. Why did they do this? I didn't get this. You know, I know you don't want to have RVD lose. He's one of your top stars, but you're building up Brock Lesnar for the main event, and you have him lose by DQ. In my opinion, that was a mistake, but you know, I think people forgot about that and overlooked it, which is fine. You know, that worked out for WWE. Brock was still very credible as a monster and was able to get past that. Next up, we have Unforgiven 2002 from the Staples Center in LA. I was actually not at this one. This was a good show up until the main event. Wasn't a big fan of the Undertaker-Brock Lesnar match because they did this double DQ, and basically it was just a cop-out. You know, I hate when they do the DQs on pay-per-view, especially in your main event match. You ended on a DQ. Just a very unsatisfying conclusion, especially when you're shelling out $35-40, whatever it was at the time, for a pay-per-view without a decisive finish in your main event. So this was really disappointing, and the crowd hated. Of course, they booted out of the building. One match I definitely want to note is Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle. Excellent match, really spectacular. I mean, these guys, every time they got in the ring, it was magic, and just the intensity and the physicality. These guys were just athletic machines, and you know, this match was beautiful, work of art. Definitely recommend it. I would say the Royal Rumble match they had a few months later was even better, but this was still, you know, 4.5-star match. I mean, really tremendous stuff from these two. And as far as the rest of the show goes, you had this match with Chris Jericho and Ric Flair, and they were doing the storyline here where Ric Flair was uncertain of himself, and he allowed Chris Jericho to fool him. And, you know, Ric Flair's the dirtiest player in the game, and he's the one getting fooled. So, you know, Flair's really down on himself. And, you know, this played in later on the show. You had Triple H and RVD for the World Heavyweight title, since the champion, Brock Lesnar, went to SmackDown. So Raw had to have their own champion, and that's when Triple H was given the World Heavyweight title, and he defended it here against RVD. At the time, a lot of fans hated the fact that RVD lost to Triple H when RVD had so much momentum and Triple H was just handed the belt. And people were getting sick of Triple H, but you know, the Triple H era was in full swing here. And Ric Flair came out, cost RVD the match, and you know, this would be the start of what would eventually become Evolution. So it is what it is. Some people liked it, you know, people like Evolution, but some people hated the fact that RVD didn't get the world title here when his character was really hot. Next up, we have No Mercy 2002. Another pay-per-view that I felt was just average. The main event was very good. You had The Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar. This was way better than the Unforgiven match. And Undertaker did the right thing here and put over Brock Lesnar, who was a champion. And I like the storyline they did. You know, Undertaker's wife Sarah. You know, Brock Lesnar stalking her, not like DDP stalking, but giving her a hard time and threatening her and, you know, intimidating her. So I thought that the build up for this was really good. But everything else on this show was fairly forgettable. I did enjoy the tag team title match, the WWE tag team titles, Angle and Benoit against Edge and Rey Mysterio. This was a good match. Triple H and Kane, the less said about this, the better, especially the storyline build-up. You had the infamous Katie Vick segment to lead up to this match. So it was just a standard Triple H title defense. And, that's really the only noteworthy things on this entire show. Next up, we have Armageddon, which was the final pay-per-view of the year, the first B pay-per-view since Shawn Michaels made his comeback. He faced Triple H at SummerSlam and then won the title in the Elimination Chamber match at Survivor Series, which was excellent. The thing about Shawn Michaels is he didn't really need the title. Shawn Michaels was just Shawn Michaels. He didn't need to have the world title. He had nothing to prove. So I guess WWE felt it wasn't necessary to have him be a long-term champion. So he quickly lost it back to Triple H. Honestly, I would have preferred if Shawn Michaels had kept the title to WrestleMania, especially when they did Jericho versus Michaels. That for the world title, I think would have elevated that match even more. And the Triple H Booker T match at WrestleMania was very much a letdown. But, it is what it is. As far as their match goes, it was a 2 out of 3 falls match, best of 3. The first match was a street fight, went about 20 minutes. This was really good stuff. I still think the SummerSlam match was a little bit better, but still really good. The thing that just didn't work out that well was doing the 3 falls, because after 20 minutes in a street fight, what else can you really do? They did the cage match, and honestly, it was kind of boring. It just it didn't seem like it went anywhere. And Shawn Michaels won that. It was basically just a continuation of the first match with a cage. And it felt like it would have been better if they had just done a 1-fall match. And then they did the third match, which was the ladder match. And this only went about 4 or 5 minutes. It was literally one of the shortest ladder matches in WWE history. I just felt this would have been a lot stronger if they had just picked one stipulation and went with that and did a solid 25-30 minute match instead of doing the 3 falls. I think it was just a little bit overkill. And Triple H won the title. Shawn got knocked off the ladder through the tables. So Shawn was still taking crazy bumps. Even though he had been gone for 4 years, he came back and still proved to everybody that he could still be the showstopper. So, still good stuff here. Kurt Angle being the Big Show to win the world title, the WWE title. So confusing here with the WWE title and the world title. And looking at the rest of this card, I did enjoy the tag team title match, the 4-way dance with Goldust and Booker T winning the tag team titles. I enjoyed them as a tag team. They were doing the skits back when Booker was still in the NWO, and then they formed the tag team, and that was a lot of fun. Booker T and Goldust had good chemistry as a team. This was Batista's first pay-per-view match against Kane, and Batista was still really green, and he couldn't even get Kane up for a power bomb. So yeah, this one was not very pretty. Another enjoyable match: Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. Like Benoit and Angle, these guys never had a bad match. Anytime they went out there, it was really good stuff. So, those were some of the highlights of this pay-per-view. Moving on here to 2003, No Way Out. This was actually a really fun show to watch, and a lot of it had to do with the crowd. They were in Montreal. They were red hot on this show. One of those Bizarro Land crowds where they would cheer the bad guys and boo the good guys. And, the fans reacted the way they wanted to react. And they cheered for who they wanted to cheer for, booed who they wanted to boo for. The opening match, Chris Jericho versus Jeff Hardy. You had Shawn Michaels doing his run-in to set up the WrestleMania match. And the crowd just booed Shawn Michaels out of the building, which was great. You had, hold on a second here. You had Scott Steiner versus Triple H, which was coming off the Royal Rumble match, which was pretty much a disaster, where Scott Steiner was botching things and was just completely gassed, and the fans booed him out of the building at the Royal Rumble. And here it was more the same. The fans were just booing Scott Steiner. This was definitely better than the Royal Rumble match, but crowd did not like Scott Steiner. They didn't like Big Papa Pump. They felt he was definitely over the hill. And one of those rare occasions where Triple H was the fan favorite at this time, even though he was beating people left and right and everyone on the internet was complaining about him burying people. This was one of those times where the fans were happy Triple H was winning a match over somebody. You had Steve Austin beating the crap out of Eric Bischoff, and that's basically all it was. Austin just coming back and destroying Bischoff. So, it is what it is. The Rock versus Hogan, the big rematch from WrestleMania 18. Not as good as the first match. They were not able to really capture lightning in a bottle twice, even though The Rock, as a heel now, did a tremendous job. And the crowd was hot for Hogan, of course, since it was in Montreal. But then they had the lame finish with the lights going out and the crooked referee and Vince screwing over Hogan to set up WrestleMania. So, kind of cheesy. And, yeah, that was pretty much it in terms of noteworthy matches on this show. Next up, we have Backlash 2003. Not a whole lot to say about this one either. The main event, Goldberg versus The Rock, I thought was really disappointing. WWE, right from the get-go, screwed up on Goldberg, in my opinion. Instead of letting him be the Goldberg of old, they tried to mold him into the WWE version of Goldberg. And they did these segments with The Rock, where The Rock called him Whisker Biscuit and got the best of The Rock, or The Rock got the best of Goldberg. And I didn't like the storyline build-up at all. And I think it did a lot of damage to Goldberg's character. And when Goldberg came out for this match, the people were booing him. They were cheering The Rock and booing Goldberg. I know The Rock's just being The Rock, but he was making Goldberg look like a fool. And fans wanted to see the old Goldberg, the Goldberg that would come out and just destroy people, and that didn't happen here. So yeah, this was a really disappointing match. The best thing on this pay-per-view, in my opinion, was Big Show beating Rey Mysterio, and then a very memorable moment when Big Show had Rey Mysterio tied into the gurney, and he picked up Rey Mysterio and just slammed him into the ring post. Really scary spot because Rey was all... because the EMTs had buckled him up so he could not move his hands or anything, and he literally bounced off the ring post and hit his head face first on the mat, which was really scary that he had no way to protect himself. But yeah, this was one of those spots when you see it, it's something you never forget. Tag team match, which opened the show, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas against Los Guerreros. That was entertaining. And you had Brock Lesnar defending the WWE title against John Cena. John Cena's first, I think, WWE title match, which Brock Lesnar won, of course. So John Cena was not Super Cena quite yet. But still interesting to see John Cena rise up the ranks in WWE with the hip-hop character. Alright, and finally we have the Judgment Day 2003 pay-per-view from Charlotte, North Carolina, which was the final pay-per-view before WWE started doing Raw exclusive pay-per-views and SmackDown exclusive pay-per-views. This pay-per-view was fine. Wasn't great, wasn't terrible. The main event, Brock Lesnar versus Big Show in a stretcher match, coming off the previous month when Big Show did that whole thing to Rey Mysterio. It is Big Show in a main event, so you're not going to get something Benoit quality or Shawn Michaels quality, or your typical WWE main event quality. But, I mean, it was fine. No real complaints about it. It was a good match for these two. Kevin Nash versus Triple H. Once again, Kevin Nash in a title match. Can't expect too much. Ended in a DQ. Kind of lame. You had Mr. America, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan, versus Roddy Piper. So you had Hogan versus Piper in 2003 on a WWE pay-per-view. Really, it was more about the angle than the actual wrestling. What they did, it was a fairly short match, so, it wasn't too terrible, but, Piper was really out of shape, and, it was the Hogan-McMahon storyline that was carrying it. Christian winning the reinstated IC title, and I actually think the best match on this show was the ladder match between Eddie Guerrero and Tajiri against the world's greatest tag team. I thought that this was a really entertaining match, and Eddie Guerrero developing the whole lie, cheat, steal storyline. So this was really fun. Alright, so that'll wrap it up for my thoughts on the B pay-per-views from April 2002 through May 2003. Leave a comment, let me know what you thought about the pay-per-views, which ones you liked, which ones you didn't like, your favorite matches, your least favorite matches. Leave a comment, Stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in the world of wrestling. Thank you guys very much for watching.